Hello everyone, this is part of the continuing series on the opening of A Christmas Carol. This particular video will focus on the passage that you can see on the screen right now and the way that Dickens establishes the character of Scrooge. What are we told? Starting at the top, Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. He answered to Scrooge, he answered to Marley, and what does this tell us about him? He doesn't really care about the way that other people see him. Whereas many people are concerned with titles and ranks, proudly displaying them on their doors. And if you had a company, you'd have a signage which clearly displays who you are. Scrooge doesn't do any of that. It doesn't interest him. And perhaps that's because, as expressed in the previous video, he is sole. He is now cut off and isolated. He is alone following the death of his partner Marley. But it's this second paragraph where things really begin to kick off in terms of telling us about Scrooge. He's a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. So if I were to encourage you here to all put your hand out in front of you, put it flat, scrunch it up into a fist, and as hard as you can, clench that fist. That's the image that we're being given of Scrooge, a man who is constantly squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching. These are a series of present tense verbs which tell us that Scrooge is doing them. They are a kind of constant for him and the way that he lives. And each of those words, along with him being tight-fisted, tells us of a man who is uncharitable, unkind. So what you have to do with this text, and any text really, is consider, well, what do the words mean? To squeeze, typically you're going to be inflicting some kind of pain on something else, or if you're squeezing a sponge, you're wringing every single drop out of it. If you're wrenching something, if you wrench your back, it's causing pain again. If you're wrenching something using a specific tool, it requires grit, determination, strength. It's an aggressive action. To grasp, again, it's all about suggesting that Scrooge as a character is trying to retain things, keep his wealth to himself. To scrape, if you scrape a plate, if you scrape that plate, you're making sure that every last ounce of food on that plate goes towards something. To be covetous is to desire things. If you covet another man's possessions, you want their possessions, you're jealous, you're envious. And so we're being told that Scrooge is a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, which implies that he's mean and miserly. To be a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone has the additional interpretation of being somebody who makes others work especially hard. There's not much charity or kindness. And then we have this series of verbs. Now we'll notice that it's a list. And if I show you this particular screen here, throughout this text, it's helpful if you're familiar with two different types of list. You have a syndetic listing and syndetic listing. And you can see the explanation there. A syndetic listing doesn't have a conjunction. Syndetic listing does. So you've got the examples there on the screen. A further example might be, I went to the shops and I bought apples, pears, oranges, bananas. That's an asyndetic list. Another example, I went to the shops and I bought apples and pears and oranges and bananas. That's a syndetic list. What's the purpose of these two different types of list? Well, the answer is it does depend on the text and what's going on in the text. But broadly speaking, I tend to feel that syndetic listing with the use of and or any other conjunctions like for or as or but, because, or yet, so, can make writing feel more sort of simplistic, more childlike. And with childishness comes maybe more excitement as well. Asyndetic listing, where there is no and, no conjunction, tends to create a sense of pace, fluidity, movement. So it does depend on the context. And in this instance, this particular list, this asyndetic list, is about creating a sense of scale. It's not just one verb, it's not just two verbs, or even three. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous, 6 or 7 verbs, creating a sense of the scale of Scrooge's miserliness. Then we're told that Scrooge is hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. He's secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. Now these are two of the most famous similes in this text, and probably any text, to be honest. So let's be entirely clear on what these things are. He's as hard and sharp as flint. And you can see here, flint was widely used to make stone tools and to start fires. And what does flint look like? It looks like this. And it looks pretty hard and it looks pretty sharp. I think. I'm not an expert on starting fires, but you try and rub the stones together and gradually create a spark. So what we're being told here, as somebody starts their lawnmower up, is that Scrooge is like this piece of flint. He's jagged. He has the ability to cause pain. If somebody were to catch themselves on a piece of flint, they could potentially draw blood. So Scrooge is this sharp, unwelcoming, difficult figure. Perhaps like flint, he has been compressed and compacted and made over the course of his life into this difficult, antagonistic character. But then, like flint, he has the ability to potentially spark into life. So although on the surface this flint looks unappealing, it's not going to draw anyone to it, is it? It doesn't look pretty. It has the potential to spark life, to spark into life, to create fire. And so Scrooge is like this flint. Scrooge is also like an oyster. An oyster that has a hard exterior, perhaps an impenetrable exterior. I don't know if any of you have watched any chefing shows, but you can't crack an oyster. They tend to have to stick a knife in between the middle of it and prise it open. And Scrooge is like this oyster which requires prising open. He needs to be opened up, because if he is then opened up, he might be like that oyster in he might be like the pearl in the oyster, precious, a jewel, a gem, something special and spectacular. I chose this particular picture because the oyster is quite large and the pearl is really quite small, and I thought that was a good representation of Scrooge's character. There is something wonderful in his character, but at this particular time in his life it is small and almost insignificant. Scrooge is not like this pearl and this oyster. He's not open to the world. He is tightly shut up, and you'll hear me clapping my hands there. He is shut. And he requires the catalyst that is Marley's ghost, and the ghost of Christmas past, and the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come, to prise him open and to open him up. So if we look at these lines in just a touch more detail, the rest of it, we are told that Scrooge is like flint that's never been lit. He's never struck out generous fire. He's never created warmth or heat or light What does fire do? It provides heat and light. And Scrooge has never done that, so it reinforces his character as cold, unappealing. And then, like the oyster, he is secret and self-contained. So we might be able to use words like he's insular, insular. He's insular. He is introverted. But over the course of the text, we're going to learn that this doesn't have to be the case, because it wasn't always the case. Now, as we move on, we're told more about Scrooge, and Dickens uses an extended metaphor of temperature, heat and cold throughout this part of the text, and then that continues into the rest of the text. So we're told here that the cold within him, so the cold that's in his character, that harsh unfriendliness, froze his features, nipped his pointed nose, and shriveled his cheek. Now, some people, I like to explain this when I'm teaching by using my own face. Some people have lovely, happy, smiley faces. They're always smiling. Their sort of lips turn upwards even, and other people don't. They have lips which turn downwards. They look kind of permanently annoyed. Scrooge, as a character, is one of these permanently annoyed people. Because of his unhappy mental state, it's even affected his physical state. So he has a pointed nose which is nipped. His cheek has been shriveled. So despite his wealth, and we'll discover more about that as the text continues, his shriveled has become sort of dry and wrinkly, and his physical appearance demonstrates a man who doesn't enjoy life despite his material possessions. He even has a walk. His gait is the way you walk, your gait. He has a gait which is stiff. So if you think about this, think about the ways that people walk. Some people are very loose-limbed, their arms kind of moving everywhere. There's like a freedom to their movements. And then there are others who look stiff and uncomfortable. Now, maybe there are medical reasons for this, but Dickens is making it clear that for Scrooge, it's not about anything biological. This is all psychological. Scrooge's psychological, his mental attitudes are shaping his physical appearance. So his eyes are red, his thin lips are blue, and he speaks shrewdly in a grating voice. Imagine if somebody were always talking in a way that kind of unnerved you. Now, perhaps we're going to find voices grating in different ways. But the point is that Scrooge is speaking shrewdly. His words are always considered. They're always thoughtful. There's nothing superfluous. There's nothing extra. That's what that means. So superfluous, extra. There's no excess at all in the way that he lives. Then we're told about a frosty rime being on his head. We're being told here about the colour of his hair, the colour of his eyebrows. It's frosty, it's white and grey. He's got a wiry chin. So we're almost being created here, or Dickens is almost creating here, a caricature. Scrooge is almost excessively hateful to look at. Hateful might be too strong, but if it's excessive, then we're breaking into the realms of caricature, where everything is exaggerated, everything is made more of. So Scrooge's physical appearance is exaggerated, perhaps into a caricature, perhaps to really elaborate on the antagonistic nature of his character. He carries that low temperature always around with him. So wherever Scrooge goes, he takes that coldness, and it doesn't defrost to thaw. It doesn't defrost even at Christmas. So even at a time of the year when everyone is happy and full of Christmas cheer and Christmas spirit and the tidings of the season, nuh-uh, not Scrooge. For him, there's no such thing as external heat or cold, because no warmth warms him. We're here now. So what we're being told here about the weather is that the weather is a sign of something that's external, and anything that's external to Scrooge is irrelevant to Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. Anything external is irrelevant, because no wind is bitterer than he. So Dickens here compares Scrooge to the wind, and Scrooge here is personified as, well, of course he's personified, but he's metaphorically, he's figuratively colder than Mother Nature could ever be. So the caricature perhaps is being extended, because even foul weather, here we are, foul weather didn't know what to do with him. The heaviest rain and sleet, the heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet, syndetic list. They only had one advantage: they sometimes looked nice. Scrooge never looked nice. They never came down handsomely. So when snow falls onto streets, if there's enough of it, it's beautiful, it's pure, it's perfect. And Scrooge doesn't have that on his side. And the caricature is extended still further. Just these last two paragraphs for this video. Nobody ever spoke to him. So we're being told here, Dickens establishes that the rest of society sees Scrooge and treats him differently because of his appearance. No one says, "How are you? You're going to come round to my house?" Even the beggars don't ask for anything. The children don't ask him the time. Nobody ever asks him what time of the day it is. Even the blind men's dogs. Hyperbole, I think. That exaggeration again. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him. And when they saw him coming on, they would tug their owners into the doorways. So the blind men's dogs would tug the blind men into the doorways so that they could hide from Scrooge. And they'd say the equivalent of, "It's better not to be able to see than to have eyes like that, Scrooge." I mean, you've got to laugh. You've got to laugh because they're saying to people who are blind, and presumably people who are blind would like to see, it strikes me as a reasonable thing to assume. Even the blind would prefer to not see than to see in the way that Scrooge does. It's staggering. So it's initially funny, I think. It's preposterous. And then it takes on a sort of really dark and sinister tone. Scrooge is characterised as so dreadful that even the dogs fear him. But Scrooge doesn't care because it's the thing that he likes. And I think that's a good place in which to pause this particular video. Hope you keep up with this and look forward to the next one.